What is this Boris wave? Because this is the new buzzword for reform. The last 3 days, all I keep hearing is the Boris wave, the Boris wave, the Boris wave. What is the Boris wave exactly?
I do think justice needs to be served for the victims. Otherwise, it sends a message out that you can literally pop on a boat, come and commit heinous crimes, and we'll pay for you to return to your own country.
And she knew he was a paedophile by that point, and she's still like, oh, my dear friend. It just makes me want to vomit. Hello, I'm JJ and this is Yobi, and welcome to the Daily Expresso. Today I'm joined by the wonderful Belinda DeLucy. Belinda, how art thou?
I am art very well. Sorry, my mind wasn't in Shakespearean language just then, but it can be.
Well, you're looking well.
Thank you so much.
You are
It's nice
certainly
to see
a
you.
fan favourite on this show.
Well, I love
so
it.
thanks for coming back in. Now, let's start with some news that broke moments before we started recording. Hadush Kebetu, the asylum seeker who had been staying at the Bell Hotel in Epping, has been sentenced to 12 months in prison after sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl and a woman in Essex. The initial incident fueled weeks of protests at the site and happened about a week after he arrived in the UK on a boat. Kebetu, who was a teacher of sports in his home country, wants to be deported, calling it his firm wish and a view he held before the trial. Belinda, I think deport him. Get rid of him, no? That's
JJ,
it. You
no.
commit a crime, get out.
This riles me on every single level to the very depths of my cells running through my body.
Justice has been served. Get rid of him.
No. These men who break into our country, every life ruined by each one of them is clearly at the hands of Westminster, who have enabled and been complicit in exposing the British people to this level of risk, and to women and to girls of this extra layer of risk. I am so angry that these men are in our country, so angry that we are rewarding these men for breaking into our country. If they commit a crime and get immediately deported without serving any sentence, what message does that send out to the world? It basically says you can come and commit crime tourism. Just get on a plane, get on a boat, come over to the country, rape our women, sexually assault, drug deal, whatever you like, and the taxpayer will then pay for you to go back to your own country of origin without any justice served to the victim. So as much as I understand people just wanting to get rid of those who commit crimes in our country who've come from abroad, I do think justice needs to be served for the victims. Otherwise, it sends a message out that you can literally pop on a boat, come and commit heinous crimes, and we'll pay for you to return to your own country. I think the best thing to do is increase the sentences for such heinous crimes like this, but reduce how much we spend on their prison lifestyle. Put them in a hole, feed them a stale, crusty bit of bread every day and a bottle of water. That will reduce prices.
Sounds
for the
like the
British
gulag.
taxpayer. Gulag is too good for these people.
Okay.
I've got 4 daughters, JJ, and there is enough risk out there without Westminster importing more risk deliberately, because this is a choice by Westminster, by the way. They have a choice of being chained to these international treaties that are basically hurting the British people. I'm absolutely fuming about it. And 12 months, goodness me, our government doesn't even give, paedophiles a prison sentence. They get let off if they have abusive pictures of children. We need to up the sentences, lower the money we put into prison life, and then deport them and ban them for life after they've served their time. I
didn't see it that way, actually. You've done the first person ever to do this. You've changed my mind, actually, on the show.
Really?
Yeah,
Well
I was
done.
fully of, he's a criminal, he's foreign, send him back to his country. That's punishment enough. But actually, you're completely right. What did you call it? Tourism?
Yeah, crime tourism.
Crime
They can
tourism.
come and commit whatever they like, and then we pay for them to go back to their own country. No way.
What if instead
Punishment.
of us, because it costs something like 40 grand for the first year to have someone in prison, what if instead of that we paid his home country government £5,000 and said, put him in prison in your own country.
Well,
Here's £5 grand towards
I think
it.
deals with other countries can be done. If it comes to it and we don't have enough space or room for all the criminals that come from abroad, then making a deal with a foreign country saying we are deporting him on condition, that you put him back in prison. And of course, we have huge leverage. We can say, otherwise we'll stop foreign aid to your country. Otherwise we'll put, slap tariffs on you, just like Trump did with Colombia and other countries that didn't commit to helping them control their borders. The point point is these men are never, ever supposed to be here in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if we did that deal, which I think is a great idea, actually, let me know your comments below. I think I'm right on this one. We, instead of paying 40 grand for him to be in a nice cushy UK prison with a PlayStation and a pool table outside of his room, we just give his country 2 grand and say, put him in one of your prisons for 12 months. Because I can guarantee the prisons where he's from are going to be a lot worse than the ones we have over
JJ,
here.
that will only work if we leave the ECHR and we leave the, we scrap the Human Rights Act that Labour brought in 2005, because otherwise we cannot deport anyone who will suffer degrading treatment, which includes, having, lice in a bed or having to share a prison cell with someone else. That has been used before to keep criminals in European countries. So we'd have to completely scrap those for that to be done, which we will, by the way, if reform get in.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Will this sentence be accepted by the Epping residents? Are we going to see the end of these protests outside the hotel?
I don't think so, because the threat still remains. Having unknown, unvetted men from countries that have deeply different views towards women and deeply held misogynistic views towards women, many of these countries have. I think that threat still remains. People don't know who they are. They're unvetted. They shouldn't be here. And of course, it's a criminal's paradise because you don't even have to have documents when you arrive here. So no one can trace the crimes that you've committed in the other countries. So no, I don't think this will alleviate any of the pressure. And I think I completely understand why mums are protesting, up and down the country outside hotels. This is an abuse of power. The social contract has been ripped up between state and the British people who trust the government to keep us safe, and they're putting us at risk through deliberate, reckless immigration and asylum policies.
Okay, well, if it's not hotels they're being housed in, the small boats are still coming regardless. We have to put these people somewhere. So where would we put them instead of hotels?
Well, I would say camps. The French do it. The French, tent camps, guarded camps, old military bases, old barges. I mean, the UN. This is the thing. The liberal hysteria over we simply can't put these people anywhere except 4-star hotels and nice cushy British houses that are meant for our young people. Whereas they do it all over the world. The UN, who they literally herald as the new messiah, put people in camps all over the world to keep them safe, and they work there. So why not here? Put them somewhere away from the community and make sure they can't access the number of appeals that they can access at the moment, and have them heavily guarded. They should not be wandering our streets.
Okay, head to express.co.uk for all the up-to-date information on that story. Let's move on. Yesterday, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage proposed ending indefinite leave to remain, replacing it with strict work visas and higher salary thresholds. Under the plan, around 800,000 people, including EU citizens with settled status, could lose residency and access to benefits. Now, European officials have slammed the idea, warning it would breach the legally binding Brexit withdrawal treaty and damage UK-EU relations. Labour have said the plan is unworkable and question the claimed £234 billion in savings. Okay, first of all, I'll say the EU were always going to hate this idea, right? That was always going to be the case. Of course, they're not going to want to see other Europeans being downgraded, so to speak, in the UK.
Look, the British people have been in an abusive relationship with Westminster since Brexit. When we had the chance to say no, when we had the chance to say put the brakes on the EU's power gobbling, the establishment went completely nuts and into full meltdown. And after years of trying to stop and reverse Brexit, they went into full diluting, demeaning Brexit and nullifying any of its opportunities. And the vast majority of negotiating teams, when they went over to the EU from Britain, were not batting for Britain. They were on the same side as the EU. So the EU have been lulled into this false sense of security because all they've dealt with are Westminster's mini EU, little lemmings going over and saying, listen, you dictate whatever you like because we're on your side. They are going to get the shock of their life when Nigel and Reform get into power, and they finally are faced with a British Prime Minister who has a backbone, who will fight for his country, who will fight for the British people. They've not experienced that yet. They don't know what it's even like. And I think with the reform policy, they are targeting the Boris wave first over the EU settled status people.
What is this Boris wave? Because this is the new buzzword for reform. The last 3 days, all I keep hearing is the Boris wave, the Boris wave, the Boris wave. What is the Boris wave exactly?
The Boris wave is when Boris took democratic instruction in 2019 to reduce immigration and tore that contract up and reversed it and opened the doors to 3.8 million people to come into the UK, completely flipped open borders with the EU to open borders with non-EU. It's one of the greatest betrayals, and the British people didn't know, I don't think were aware of the billions this was costing the British taxpayers, because out of the 3.8 million who came over, only 15% came over on a skilled visa. So that means the vast majority were lower skilled migrants and the OBR has stated and reported that they cost the British taxpayer hundreds of thousands of pounds over the years in benefits and subsidies and use of NHS, use of social housing, schools. In a few years' time, all of them will have access to student loans, to the welfare system. This is going to cost us, Nigel has said, around £230 billion over the next few years when they get the right to remain here. And what the Boris wave did was, I think, frighten people into, certainly me, looking at a government that had completely lost their senses, that hadn't looked at the future path, how much this would cost us. And Nigel is focusing on them first and making sure that only those worthy of staying here who contribute, because many do, and so they won't be targeted for this at all. But those who live off the British taxpayers' back, have to go home. You can't move to someone else's country, JJ, and expect the workers there to fund your lifestyle. Well, I couldn't do it in America. This is just normal.
So my wife is American. Yeah. She is here eventually will be indefinite leave to remain. If she doesn't earn £60,000, we've then got to decide whether we all move to America, which means you're going to lose myself, a British-born citizen, my son, a British-born citizen.
No, don't go, JJ.
I think I'm a little bit talented. I think I have a little bit of high skill. I would leave this country, as will thousands, tens of thousands of people would also do the same thing. They will leave to be with their counterparts, because there's no, how can you split up a family? In order to target the people who are coming here and aren't contributing properly, you're also going to be throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Well, hang on a minute. This is about renewing your visas. This isn't just you're out. This is just a different system where every 5 years or so you renew your visa. A work visa used to mean, in the old days, you know, you were given a visa to come over to a country and work, and it got renewed depending on how much you contributed to the country. That's all that we're saying. So it's those who are a net fiscal drain. We can't afford it, JJ. We simply cannot afford this huge bill.
60 grand per year you're asking people to be earning. Most people in this country don't earn more than 30,000 a year. Well,
then you can apply also for citizenship. There are many, many other avenues. We're just saying we need to close this loophole where, millions of people have come over here on low-skilled visas. They get to bring all their dependents and they get to access everything that we've worked so hard for, and our ancestors have spilt their blood, sweat and tears to build this country. Yeah. It's not right. We've become an all-you-can-eat buffet for the world to just chow down on when you've got construction workers, plumbers, electricians taking less and less home to their families to feed them because we're paying for foreign nationals. I'm sorry, but that's immoral and unjust and unfair on the British people.
Okay, so we kick out Ukrainians first off.
But you're saying kick out. They just have to renew their visa.
Okay,
this is totally different.
Okay, so Ukraine has to renew their visa and they're not earning more than 60,000. They're not going to be able to stay. So they've got to go back to war-torn Ukraine. Same for people from Hong Kong. Same for the Afghans. They all go back to the places that we had done deals with them to bring them here and said, we'll protect you and make you safe. Now, this is going to mean a lot of those people do not earn currently more than 40,000. They're not going to be earning suddenly, now can earn 60 grand. Doing what? Doing a low-skilled job. No, so those people will have to leave.
So I love your concern for foreign nationals. That is the priority of Westminster too. Barely a question is ever asked about How do the Brits feel about this? How do people feel about, we don't have enough money for nurses and doctors. We don't have enough money for police on our streets or to help children with special needs. But look at the money tree for foreign countries and foreign nationals. I am concerned, first and foremost, with the hardworking people of this country whose grandfathers and ancestors right back to 2,000 years have done so much to build it into the country they have. My priority, I'm sorry, is not foreign nationals first. I totally love and welcome all those who want to come here, who pay their way and want them. I love having skilled, brilliant people over here from around the world. But enough is enough. We have to reduce it to those who are exceptional, who contribute, just so we can grow our economy. We're dying financially, JJ.
Okay, but then the NHS has plenty of workers there who are not going to be earning 60 grand. So what would happen to those people? We're going to suddenly just say, okay, all the nurses we've brought in, all the carers, all the porters, you guys, I'm afraid you don't meet the threshold, you got to go. We're going to give all those jobs to British people now, and we're going to suddenly have 20,000 nurses out of nowhere. I just don't think the numbers stack up. It's great in theory for Nigel to say this is what we're going to do, but even the number he said, 230 billion, that number's been called into question by the people who actually he took the data from. They said this number should not be used because it's based on erroneous data.
Do you know, it's funny because there is a sort of moral narcissism, no judgment, on people.
Feels like a judgment.
On people
Feels like judgment.
who keep saying, but what about our NHS? We're dependent on foreign workers. How moral is it, to strip poorer countries of their health staff because our government refused to fund and train up our own domestic workforce? Doctors and nurses in this country are capped at around 7,000 to 9,000. We have nurses and doctors trained up for the job who can't find work in our NHS because it's filled by much cheaper foreign labour. Westminster are abusing the British public. We can't even train our own domestic workforce because the government says it's too expensive. So we open the doors, strip all the poor countries of their health staff, make them poorer, make them less likely to develop, which I think is immoral. I think you can be incredibly grateful for foreign workers in our NHS, which I am, without saying that means we have to scrap training our own domestic workforce. Something has to be done, JJ. We cannot replace this country's workforce with cheap foreign labour and not see a huge uprising and a huge decrease in society and cohesion. The British people deserve to have their government look after them and train them up. The NHS never needed huge numbers of foreign labour when I was young. What happened? What changed? Westminster couldn't be bothered to train up our own domestic workforce. That has to stop, JJ.
Okay, well, on that bombshell, let's move on to the next topic. It might finally be cut into Prince Andrew's royal privileges after it emerged that King Charles could be forced to intervene in the latest instalment in the Jeffrey Epstein row. The King could be forced to ban Andrew and his ex, Sarah Ferguson, from private royal events after their latest scandal involving the dead paedophile. This comes after new revelations involving the publication of emails from Sarah to Epstein following his release from jail on child sex offences. In the emails, which were sent in 2011, Sarah can be seen issuing an apology for disassociating herself from her quote-unquote supreme friend when it had emerged that he had bailed her out financially. 6 UK charities, including Teenage Cancer Trust, have now dumped Fergie as a patron. But Belinda, they had no choice, right? How are you going to have someone a patron for charities that are helping children, and this patron is openly friends with a known paedophile, and she knew he was a paedophile by that point, and she's still like, oh, my dear friend. It just makes me want to vomit.
I mean, there are certain things you can recover from, JJ, right? We had a prince that was involved in tampon gate, right? And I'll leave that to the listeners to Google what that was because, it's a bit too saucy for this show. And he's now our king, right? So there are certain things you can recover from, including Sarah Ferguson's, obviously, toe-sucking, topless photos in 1992.
We have to put a disclaimer on this.
Yeah,
trigger warning.
Alleged. Photographs prove it. And she was able to just about recover from that. But I'm sorry, supporting a convicted child abuser is something you just cannot recover from, especially in this climate where our country is so angry about the grooming gang scandal, so angry about the abuse of power and people turning a blind eye. And this is all so magpie-ish. It's like these very, high-profile people like Mandelson, like Fergie, like Andrew are drawn to Epstein and his glittery billions.
Yeah.
And they're prepared to sacrifice morality, judgment, just to get close to that sort of money and power. And I think there's something very dodgy about that. And I think the monarchy needs to be protected. Whoever's king or queen, we don't want a president two-tier Keir, running our country. We do need to keep, and for the sake of the monarchy, I do think it's important that those in or close to the royal family who have supported Epstein since his conviction, are not allowed to attend a lot of the events. And remember, Sarah's excuse, let's say, for sending these hugely supportive emails to Epstein saying he was, so generous and a supreme friend. This was after he was convicted. Her excuse was said, I sent them because Epstein had threatened to sue me. Now, I'm sorry, there's something a whiff of porky pies about that, JJ, because, he was convicted. So how could a convicted child abuser sue somebody for defamation when it's been proved in court? So I think she's got herself into a right pickle. I think it'll be very awkward for Eugenie and Beatrice at family events having their parents banned. And of course, the Queen very kindly let Sarah into attending private events after Philip died because she was persona non grata with Prince Philip out of kindness to Beatrice and Eugenie. And I'm not sure the King will be so generous.
Do you think William should be, because it's quite clear William is not a fan of Andrew, should Prince William be saying to his dad, listen, Papa, it's time you booted that dodgy uncle out of the family completely. Get him out of our residence. Stop paying for him. Because it's King Charles who's paying for him to live.
Yes.
He has no income. King Charles is paying for him. I have a theory. It's not facts, but I have a theory that technically we are then paying because we pay for King Charles to live. King Charles is paying out of his own pocket, apparently, for Andrew to live. Vis-a-vis, we're still paying. What should William do more of to make sure that Andrew and Fergie are given the big old boot?
Possibly evict them from, I think it's Frogmore House.
Yeah.
Yes, that they've somehow managed to hang on to. I do think Andrew and Sarah should just pop off to St. Helena Island or wherever Napoleon was sent when he was thrown out of the country, just to lead a very quiet life for the sake of the monarchy and stop causing trouble. It just seems crazy, doesn't it? The Queen was a unicorn, and we all know that. It's unlikely we'll experience a monarch of that caliber. Yeah. But her children have been very, very naughty monkeys. They have really quite. If you think of Sarah and Andrew and Charles and Diana, those four did bring the monarchy into disrepute quite a few times along the year. And I think we all miss the Queen and her propriety and her dignified devotion to country first and monarchy. I don't see it with this generation of royals. I think William and Kate will be a bit different. Because William was very, very close to Queen Elizabeth. He's also very close to Eugenie and Beatrice, which is interesting. So I don't know how they'll play that out with banning their cousins, stroke friends, dearest parents from everything. But I'm sure it will take place behind closed doors and we won't really know what happens.
Well, Belinda, I can tell you're a mother. Naughty monkeys. Yeah. Fantastic.
That was putting it very politely, JJ.
Donald Trump has signed an order designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organisation. He's trying to crack down on the radical left in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Terrorist group designations, which are normally reserved for foreign organisations, might I add, allow the administration to ban members and seize funding. Trump's order directs all agencies and departments to investigate, disrupt and dismantle any and all illegal operations conducted by Antifa and its supporters. Investigators have yet to establish a motive in Kirk's killing, and there is no evidence to suggest the murder suspect was affiliated with Antifa. In his Truth Social announcement, Trump said, "I am pleased to inform our many USA patriots that I am designating Antifa, a sick, dangerous, radical left disaster, as a major terrorist organization. I will also be strongly recommending that those funding Antifa be thoroughly investigated in accordance with the highest legal standards and practices." Gosh, that man can talk, can't he? Flipping heck. But I've got to say, nearly every word that Trump said there is a lie.
Really?
Yeah, because Antifa is not an organization. There's no legal statute with which to declare them a major terrorist organisation. It's a bunch of extreme lefties who are against fascism, but they're not Al Qaeda, you know?
No, I know. And there's no membership list. There's no leader. It's going to be very difficult for Trump to go for them in that kind of fashion. Also, their First Amendment obviously says people have the right to gather. Yeah. And one thing Trump doesn't, is always heralds is the Constitution. Yeah. So I'm not sure how it's going to plan out. But Trump is right about them being violent thugs. Their logo means anarchy and communism. My experience of them outside reform rallies, outside women gathering to talk about single-sex spaces, and obviously Antifa mixed with either trans activists, environmentalists, they mix with the Palestinian cause as well. They tend to be at every sort of, anti-protest when people like me go to anything. And reform rallies, they're always masked, they're always dressed in black. In Epping, where their hotel protests were going on. And Nigel claimed that Antifa was actually getting bussed in by the police to form their anti-protest towards the mums who were protesting outside the Epping Hotel. And you saw these, middle-aged mums and dressed sweetly and holding their homemade placards, and suddenly these like communist ninjas coming in ready for a fight. They are antagonistic. They're there to cause trouble. But I do not see how you can say they're a terrorist organisation when they are not an organisation at all. And it's very clever of them, very crafty. I looked on their website today, the anti-fascist organisation, I think it's called, How to Join. And it was just like, it's all about word of mouth and all about just getting together in someone's house. There's no membership list, there's no leader, there's no structure. They are a nasty group, and I think they're far more of a threat to sort of civil unrest than any group on the right. But the political and media class will always ignore the threat of the far left because they're in their camp.
Would it not make more sense for Trump to, I don't know, try and pass a law that says you can't have face coverings on in public?
Yeah, so that's what I'd want done in this country. I think if you go to a protest, you shouldn't have a face covering on. Yeah. And I think that would be fair. I don't think you should have a face covering on when you go into public buildings either. Protests or public building. I know a lot of Muslim countries ban the burqa from public buildings. We should do that here. It is a matter of security. And I think it's very sensible to do that. I do agree, though, with Trump investigating the source of money, like who funds the anti-fascists, or in this country, hope not hate, or, anti-racism groups, because they do seem to be the very aggressive ones with very violent rhetoric. Kill the Nazis, kill the TERFs, that kind of rhetoric you get from the hard left. You never see anything like that at, say, for example, the Unite the Kingdom march that happened a couple of weeks ago.
All right, let's move on. Strictly's Thomas Skinner is banned from using his catchphrase Bosch in his company name after a battle with electrical firm Bosch. The Apprentice contestant hopes to launch a Bosch homeware brand to sell bedding and candles, but German company Bosch felt it was too similar to their brand, which makes home appliances, tools and gadgets. Their lawyers have now forced his company to change its name. A source said Thomas has huge plans for the Bosch name and wanted to attribute the name to a number of hustles. But as his profile and social media following grew, Bosch got wind of it and put their lawyers on the case. Now, he faced criticism earlier this year for his friendship with US Vice President J.D. Vance, and he has taken further flack recently after it emerged he once had an affair. I don't think I've said the word Bosch so many times in such a short space of time. Is this a microcosm of British society? You think some people are maybe being a bit snobbish, seeing a working man who speaks like a geezer. He's doing better for himself, and he's mixing with the second most powerful man in the world, arguably. Yes. And people are just kind of, trying to put him back into his box.
Of course they are. I love Thomas Skinner. I love him. I love reading his tweets. I love his energy, his bread and butter, salt the earth, fabric of England English. He's a grafter, always positive, always polite and kind to people. But of course, the sort of left progressive metropolitan elite, they are very, very snobbish, and they will hold him to a much higher standard than they would their own lot. So the poor guy's private life has been absolutely ripped to shreds because he's dared to go on Strictly and become a household name, and they can't have that. They can't have, a working class patriot, have a special place in people's hearts. So I think going after him so publicly about the affair, look, it was wrong. He's a flawed man, but I saw his apology and it was so earnest. And I actually really respect partners and marriages that stay together having gone through such awful things, not just for the sake of the children, but for the institution of marriage. And he took full responsibility. He didn't blame it on anyone else. And I mean, respect to the wife. I've got a lot of time and empathy for her. And I think this latest sort of, isn't it funny Thomas Skinner can't get his Bosch brand recognised? Well, I don't even get it because the German company is spelt differently, the one that's taken to court. And also, Thomas, why don't you just put a bish in front of the Bosch and use that, bish Bosch, or Bosch it up, or I don't know. But I really wish Thomas Skinner well. It takes so much courage to be publicly for patriotism. You're going to get absolutely torn down by the left and the media and have your private life gone through. And it's stopping a lot of talent come up through the ranks, because I don't want to be treated like Thomas Skinner. Poor guy. But good for him for holding fast and overcoming, and I do support him all the way.
Why do you think J.D. Vance wanted to meet him? He invited him to his little private barbecue. Such a strange relationship there.
I think there was a moment on Twitter where J.D. Vance maybe retweeted Thomas Skinner or saw one of his videos. Thomas Skinner did a wonderful speech about the English working class that I know got tweeted thousands of times. Maybe it was that one. And, I think I can see J.D. Vance having a real soft spot for someone like that. And Thomas Skinner is very polite and likeable. Who knows where the bromance started, JJ? Just keep it cooking, and maybe next time go and have dinner with Trump. Bring him over again.
Do you hope Tommy Boy wins Strictly? Do you care?
I do, just because it's Thomas Skinner. I mean, I don't normally watch Strictly Come Dancing at all, but I will now. Now he's on it, and I just want to. It's putting a finger up to the establishment if he wins, saying, this is the bread and butter. This is who represents our country as well as all the sort of well-to-do, Fanar, liberal, glossed over, new messiahs, whatever they like to call themselves.
I don't think he will win Strictly for one reason only. He's a West Ham fan. And they are all terrible.
JJ.
They're all rubbish people. Bosh to that. Right, the caffeine has worn off. Thank you very much for watching the Daily Expresso. Thank you to Belinda. Join us tomorrow where we are joined by the firecracker Carol Malone. Bye-bye.